Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. It is hump day, whoop whoop. Happy hump day, happy Wednesday to each of you. And I am so glad that y'all stopped by and this is what we are making. Yes, this is it. It's 3-leaf clovers. 4s looked a little wonky. I didn't like it. So I did with the 3-leaf clovers. It's a St. Patty's Day wall hanging, table topper, anything you like. But yeah, that's what we're getting to today. And this actually only finishes at 36 by 36. Okay. And I'm going to give you some information here. Like usual, I do have a supply sheet, so you do not have to memorize that. It can be found down here. I'm going to put the address for those of you who are watching on your television and can't find the description box, but the link is in the description box for you. All the things that, all the fabric here, you can find in our shop, to include, I'm going to show a couple of variations here in a little bit, but yes, so this is a little stretch for me because I use solids, except for the background because I couldn't get away from it. So this is actually Kona Green, Clover. It's actually called Clover by Kona, Robert Kaufman's Kona line. And the dark green here is actually Hunter Green. And then the background that you're seeing is actually Blossoms Tone on Tone White by Christopher Thompson for Riley Blake Designs. I couldn't get away from it. I just couldn't do a Kona White, but I have that in the shop too if you're interested. So that's this coloration, and it was different for me. I stretched myself. I'm going to show you. Y'all know, if you've been around a while, you know I like black, right? I love a black background. So I'm going to throw a picture up here, and it's going to let you see what black background looks like. So instead of this white, I'm showing you everything else was the same. I kept this as the Kona Clover and the Hunter Green, and I just added a Kona Premium Jet Black. So that's what that variation looks like. Now, this is the one I really like, but I wanted to stretch myself a little bit. So every now and again, we all got to do something maybe that we wouldn't necessarily do, but this one I really like. So this picture here, what I did is I took the fabrics, and instead of the Clover Green Kona, that's actually the greens that you can find in the Stitch line by Lori Holt for Riley Blake Designs. I do have some of the fat quarters, the bundles in our shop, so if you're interested, but I just used the green. Okay, so all of those are different greens, and I thought it was so cute. I used the same background with, no, I did not. I believe it's cross stitch. I had to think about it. Cross stitch, either brown or gray. Both of those I carry in the shop, but that actually is a Lori Holt fabric also for Riley Blake Design. So I did keep it a Lori Holt theme of her fabrics. I thought it turned out super adorable. That will be so much fun to make. But like I said, I went with this one because I wanted to test it. But saying that, you'll see that every single one of these tiny blocks in this block right here, they're all 2.5-inch squares. Okay, the reason I went ahead with this design of keeping, even though I could have done some longer strips, I could have done a longer strip here, there's different places and you'll see that. I wanted to give you the affordability to keep it scrappy. Okay, you don't have to go and buy fabric if you have enough scraps to get all your squares in. Okay, and the background can be scrappy too. You don't have to use the same background. You can use different shades of off-white or white and really have fun with that, or any color for that matter, as long as there's a contrast so you can see your clover. So that's why it's designed this way. I wanted to give you options, and I wanted to show you a little bit of color variation and what that would look like. So there's that. Now, what are we going to need for this quilt? I will tell you, for the light green color, so they're in here and they're in the clovers, you will need 3/4 yard. Okay, the dark green, you'll need 1/4. It's actually only 18 squares, but you'll need 1/4 of a yard. And then the white, you'll also need 3/4. So 3/4, 3/4, 1/4. That's what you'll need if you're using yardage. Okay, now for backing, this finishes at 36 square, or right now it's 36.5. If you didn't use overage, it's obvious that you would only need a yard, but we all need a little overage, right? If you were doing something like, I used Robert Kaufman's calculator. For those of, if you're interested, let me know what I'm talking about. It's an app that you can use on your phone. And I just put in that I had 4 inches on each side for overage, and it said 2.5 yards. Okay, but I always just like to give you what it is without overage, because I know it just really depends on what it is that your long armor or you like for overage on your quilts. Okay, now for binding, it's going to take 1/2 yard. So it's actually 3/8, but I'm rounding things up or down. Okay, so that's what you'll need. Now, before we even get started, I'm going to pull you in, get a little close and personal with you, and talk about the different blocks and the different elements. But, and you don't have to memorize this. I went ahead and put it on the supply sheet, what you will need to cut. I don't have it memorized, so bear with me here. The light green, all the light green took 94 2.5-inch squares and 26 3-inch squares. Okay, the dark green, I said that earlier, it is 18 2.5-inch squares, so you want to get all that cut before you get started. And for the white, you'll need 26 3-inch squares, 16 2.5-inch squares, and your strips, you'll need 12 of those, and they measure at 4.5 by 12.5. Okay, so that is all the blocks that make up this darling wall hanging, table topper, whatever you like. Now I want to mention one more thing, because I don't think I've said it anywhere. You don't have to make the wall hanging, right? You don't have to do it like that. Once you figure out what how the block's made, you could make these side by side, right? For a long table runner. You can add more, of course then it'll take more fabric, but you could add more clovers and make it a bigger quilt. You can add a border and make a bigger quilt, because like I said, this is only 36 by 36, so there was a purpose for it. I haven't done anything that small in a long time, so yeah. I wanted to give you a heads up and a little bit of ideas that you can utilize this one block for. Doesn't have to go in this quilt. It can go in whatever you want it to go in, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Last but not least, I did talk about a little bit about the cornerstones and sashing near the end, or at the end. So I want to also iterate here that there is a cornerstone and sashing video that I have where it's a lot more cornerstones and sashing and a little bit more detail on pressing and things of that nature. So I'm going to throw it up here. There'll be a little eye. I'll also put it in the description box. But for those of you who are using your television, you can go to my channel and type in cornerstones and sashing, and it will pull up on my channel for you to watch that at your leisure. But I wanted to give you a heads up on that, because it is out there, and it's a little, the whole thing was really about cornerstones and sashing. So, yeah. Are you ready to make it? I'm ready to make this. So let's go ahead and get this started. I'll see you guys in just a sec. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make 9 4 patches, okay? In whichever color. So just a quick review. We have a dark, 2 darks, and 2 lights. Okay, right next to each other. I'm going to sew these 2 together and these 2 together, and I'm going to press towards the dark side. Okay, so I have them finished here, and I have pressed towards the dark. And if you'll notice on a lot of mine here, well, actually all of them, all the points match very, very nicely. Okay. There's 2 things about that. When you press to the dark side and you go to line them up together, these seams will butt very close to each other, very nicely next to each other. And to be real honest with you, to make sure, and you don't have to do this, but this is what I do, to make sure those points actually nest, I'm going to pin on the right side of the seam and on the left. Okay, and that just makes sure that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, and it makes it nice to get those beautiful points. Okay, so you're going to want to, I'm going to go ahead then and stitch a 1/4 inch seam right along here and have my finished. And it really doesn't matter which way you press them because they're squares, and there's not anything that it's going to have to match in the future with. So very easy, just press to one side or the other, or you can press open if you so desire. But you'll make 9 of those, okay? Move those out of the way. After you do that, the next thing is that we're going to have to make those half square triangles that we talked about. And each one on my particular quilt has a light fabric and a dark fabric. Now this is actually the Kona Clover, and this is actually Tone on Tone Blossoms. But the first thing I will do with each one of these are those 3-inch squares. That's what these are for. Okay. And I line up my ruler with the 1/4 inch marking where the 1/4 inch is right along the points. I mean, it's nailing the point as best as I can. I'm going to take my marking tool, my disappearing ink Dritz. You can find those in the shop. I'm going to mark on one side. I'll turn this around. Okay. And line up that 1/4 inch again. This is just my favorite method. There are a lot of methods to make half square triangles, but this way you can use the 3-inch square, okay? Then I will put the right side facing up, and the right side facing down. Now Kona, it's a solid. It doesn't really have a right side. But if you did have a right side to your fabric, I would draw it on the darker one and on the wrong side. But this one doesn't have a wrong side. So right sides together. And then I'm simply going to stitch on the inside of this line. And if you've been watching me a while, you know that I sew next to the line closest to the place I'm going to cut. So I'll sew down this line and down this line on this side. So towards the center. And this is what we'll end up with. Okay. So I have drawn these 2 lines. I've sewn on each side towards the center. I'm going to take, you can use scissors at this time, but I'm going to take my ruler, and it doesn't have to be precise, but I will cut straight down the middle. Okay. You will have 2 half square triangles. And I will tell you, notice that I don't really want to do it like this. I'm going to take this to the pressing board and not use my fingers so much. I don't want to stretch that angle. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I'm going to press it. Just give me a second. Okay, so now that I've pressed it, you'll notice that I did press this one going towards the white. I actually like to do 3 of them per block. That gives a total of 12 inside the whole quilt that are pressed towards the white. And I'll show you why. I think there's only really one that you would like to do if you like to nest your seams. Because I do press to one side and I do like my seams to nest. But there are a few points where it's kind of nice to have them open. And I'll show you here in a bit. So I'm going to press this one towards the white, but most of mine are pressed towards the dark. Okay. Then I'm going to have my angle going in a certain direction. Okay. And we're going to trim these down each to 2.5-inch squares. So we started with 3-inch. We sewed them together. We cut them in half. And now we're going to cut them down, and I'm at a weird angle, so bear with me here. I don't think that's going to be straight. Oh, no, it was. Okay. So I'm going to cut on one side, and I'm actually going to spin on camera here because of there's a table in a way. Normally I walk around and I'm going to cut the other side. Okay. That angle is here. I want to make sure that my 2.5 is not, if I can line it up, great. I could have probably lined this side up, but I didn't. But you don't want to be where that 2.5 inch line is not on top. And I know that's really hard to see, but you want to make sure that your 2.5 is on the fabric. Okay. And then I will simply turn it the other direction. And now I have a 90-degree angle that I can line up my 2.5, except I cut it crooked. So that's the beauty behind this. I wasn't quite lined up. So what I'm doing on the top here, I'm lining, I know it's hard to see, but I am lining up on the 2.5 on this side. I've got a little extra over here. I'll fix that in just a second. My point is at the corner, and I'm just going to simply cut those two sides again. Okay. And I know that I'll have to trim it one more time because I cut it wonky the first time. It was okay to cut it wonky because I wasn't going above that 2.5 inches. And so I can always trim one last time. And then we will simply cut off that little bitty edge, and we have our 2.5 inch square with fuzzies galore. Okay, so you'll need to make 13 of these for each of your squares, your blocks, your bigger blocks. Okay. And I know I gave the math, as far as how many blocks and everything earlier, but I'm just reiterating. And like I said, I like to have 3 for each block going towards the white, and the rest of them go towards the dark. And I'm going to show you why here in just a second. Let me get everything cleaned up and organized for the very next step. We're going to start to build our blocks with all of our rest of our blocks here. And I think all of the prep is just about done. But let's start making this block. I'll see you guys in just a sec. Okay, so this is the block that we are going to be making. We have 4 of them total, but they're actually 2 different ones, and I'm going to explain that in just a second. But this is actually a 12.5 by 12.5 before it goes in the quilt, okay? And each one of these are 2.5 inches. If you remember, we cut 2.5 inch half square triangles, and these are also the other 2.5 inch squares. So all of these are 2.5 inches, and that means we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have a 36 patch. Yes, I could have done this as a strip, and we could have sewn each one of these rows in the long ways to create this big thing. I like to chunk things up because in my mind, the longer the seam, the more possibility of getting things a little wonky. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down this block into 9 patches and then sew those together. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But something that I also wanted to mention, this is in your supply sheet, so you can actually see this particular thing. How to lay these out. So you don't have to memorize this. This will be given to you. It might be in grayscale, but you'll still be able to see the lines. Okay. I do the grayscale so that you can actually print it and not feel like you've gone through color ink, because that's a lot of color. So usually I do a grayscale, but this will help guide me to what I'm making. Okay. So that is in your supply sheet. Okay. Understanding that, if you look, this block looks just like this one, right? Okay. If I were to turn it, you will notice that it's different than this one. I mean, this one, sorry. It's different, right? Okay. The little check mark goes in a different direction. How things are lined up are a little bit different. And the reason is this is a mirror image. They are mirrored image. So we have to build this one a little different. So we're going to make 2 of these. And if you'll notice, if I turned it once, twice, it actually matches this one. Okay. So these 2 are the same and these 2 are the same. So you're going to make 2 going this way and 2 going this way to get them all in. Okay. All right. So what do we need for each block? You know, I've talked about how to break things down, and I did talk to you about building 2, but each block has the same numbers of fabric. You will need 19 2.5-inch squares of color. You can do this scrappy, remember? However, mine are Kona 1 solid color. So Kona Clover here, I need 19 for these solids, for these solid blocks. As far as the half square triangles go, you will need 10 going, if you do it like I do, 10 going to the dark side and 3 pressed towards the white for a total of 13. Okay. And then you'll need 4 2.5-inch light colors. In my situation, it's tone on tone white blossom. Okay. So you will need 19 2.5-inch solid squares, whether they're scrappy or one color. You will need 10 half square triangles going pressed towards the dark, 3 half square triangles pressed towards the light, and 4 solid white or solid light color 2.5-inch squares. All of this is 2.5 inches. So that's what each block will need. Okay. That's how we break this down. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to lay, using my guide, because I don't have it memorized, I'm going to lay this out, and then I'm going to show you how I broke it down to make this a lot more manageable and a lot more easy to not get so wonky. Okay, so I'm going to speed up the video and lay this out real quick. Okay, well, this guy, he needs pressed again. Okay, so notice it's even hard to see going all the way across. That's why I wanted to give you this in the supply sheet so you knew how to lay it out. But we need to break this down because this is an awful lot of squares. Now you might be asking, where did I put those 3 half square triangles that were pressed towards the white? Everywhere where there is a point, okay? Down here included, down here. Like I said, we're going to break this down so you'll be able to see all of the different parts, okay? But each one of those places where there was a point of the same color, I have a press to the white. And remember earlier I said if you didn't want to do that, there's one, if you do want to nest seams, that is imperative in my mind. The rest of them is just to make things a little easier for me in the long run, but it's not necessary. Okay, so this one is pressed towards the dark. This one is pressed towards the white. This one is pressed towards the dark. This one is pressed towards the white. This one is pressed towards the dark. Oh, you can't see. This one is pressed towards the dark. And this one in the very bottom corner is the one that I feel is necessary. If you nest seams, this is your necessary. Okay. And that way those will actually nest. And you'll see here why I say that in just a second. Okay. So this was this block going across, but we need to break this down because this is an awful lot of wonkiness that can happen. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into 4 9 patches. So we're going to spread these 2 apart, and we're going to spread them apart from the bottom, and we're going to spread these ones apart. Okay. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 9 patches. So we get those 9 patches sewn together. So I'm going to break down a little bit of the pressing if you're worried about nesting seams. The bottom line is it really, if you just pay attention to which way you sew things, it'll be okay. You don't have to do it exactly like I do, but if you're worried about nesting seams, I'm going to show you real quick what I did, okay? All right, so for this top block, all right, so for this first row, these 3 right here, okay, at the very top, I have pressed everything. These 2 I pressed going in when I sewed the 1/4 inch seam. Everything is sewn together with a 1/4 inch seam. So these 2 pressed towards the center. The middle row I pressed going out, and the last row I pressed going in. So in, out, in, okay? Then when I went to sew the 3 together, and I'm going to show you mine here in just a second, I pressed the top going towards the center and the bottom going towards the center. So here's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to pick these up. Okay. And this is that first block. And if I flip it around, the top row, I press going in. The middle row, I press going out. And look, I got 1 flip stitch in the whole thing. Isn't that a bummer? And then on the bottom row, I pressed them going in. And then when I sewed them together, I press them going towards the center. Okay, so that's that top left corner. And remember, you're going to make 2 of these. So what is the bottom? The bottom one, this time, because this last row, this is what I'm saying, you don't have to pay attention and do exactly like I did. But if you flip your block over and look, I've pressed this bottom row going towards the center. So this top row, I'm going to press going out. The middle row, when I sew those together, I'm going to press them going in. And this last row, I'm going to press them going out. That will allow these to nest with each other and to nest with the one above it. Now, when I press those together, I actually press them going in. Okay, so here is our block. We have the top row going out, the middle row going in, the last row going out, and then when I sewed them all together, I press them going in. Okay, so just like this one, they're pressed going in when I put them all together. This one is the same. I try to keep things consistent. So we're going to move this out of the way. Put that down. The other side, you're just, like I said, you just want to pay attention. What did I do over here? They were pressed going in with the rows. So I did out on the top, in the middle, out on the top. So that means down here, I will do the absolute reverse, which is in, out, in. Okay. So here's this. And when I press them all together, so you can see top row out, in, out. Okay. Then when I pressed all of the rows together to make the 9 patch, I pressed these 2 seams going out so they will nest very nicely with the other side. Okay. It doesn't matter which way, you just want to always be cognitive and keep things consistent. So if I make 2 of these, that's what I'm going to do. All right. Last but not least, we did say this last one was out. So this top one goes in, middle row pressed out, last row goes in, and then on this side, we pressed them all in. So on this side, we press them all out when we sew the individual rows together. Okay. Then when you go to sew it, now you have a 4 patch. So what I do, I sew it just like a 4 patch, just like we did earlier with the 4 blocks at the beginning. I will take these 2 1/4 inch seam and these 2 1/4 inch seam. Now the beauty behind this, and I'll show you here in just a bit, is these will nest all directions when you pay attention to your blocks and which way they're pressed. And I won't lie to you, to make sure I do nest, I actually pin just like I do on a 4-patch, but this one has a couple more points, right? So I get on the right of the seam, make sure they're nested. On the left of the seam, the right, the left, on both of the seams, making sure that they are nested and they are touching but not overlapping. Okay. And then I sometimes even go as far as getting my corners. And then I can sew that whole thing together. Once they are together, you can sew them together just like a 4-patch. It's not hard, guys. It makes it a lot of fun. Now, as far as the other one goes, okay, so now we're just going to look at this block. It's built the same way. I laid out all my squares just like the other one, and I just paid attention to my pressing. Okay, so I'm looking at my diagram, and I'm making sure I'm laying it out. I've built a 9-patch, okay, and I've paid attention to all of the ways that I pressed. And I did it just the same as the other one. So these are going in, these are going out, these are going out, these are going in. These will nest. I don't know if you can see all, yeah, you can see all that. Everything is going to nest. It doesn't matter which way you do it. You just want to pay attention. In, out, opposites of each other. Just a simple 9-patch. And then you'll sew your 9 patches together as 4-patch. And then you'll have finished 12.5 inches of blocks. 2 going this way. And 2 going that way. Plain and simple, guys. Super easy. It's not hard, but once you get all your blocks together, then we go to the next step. I will say, before I let you go, I will sew with this. This is a 4.5 by 12.5, okay? Strip. These are our 4 patches. These actually, if you measure them out before you add them on, they should be 4.5 inch squared. So they will match very, very nicely. So I'll make 3 like this with a 4 patch on both sides. And I'll make 3 with a 4 patch on one side. Okay? It's that easy, guys. So that's going to help us for the next step. I'm going to actually bring you to the design board. And I'll show you what I do to get those cornerstones and sashing. Before I leave, I thought of one more thing. If you want to measure these out before you start putting the 4 patches together, each of these should be 6.5 inch squared. Okay, so you'll have 4 6.5 inch squares. When you sew them all together, it makes that 12.5 inch beautiful block. Okay, so I'll see you guys at the design board in just a sec. Okay, so once you have all your blocks put together, now we're just going to put some sashing on it. Now, this only has 4 blocks, so basically, you know, it's like a border around each block, but you really could do the same method with any sashing that you have. But the first thing that I did was on this side, okay, and it doesn't matter which side you do it, you just want to keep consistent, so eventually we can build this into a 4 patch. Yeah, this seems to be a theme going on with this particular quilt, right? But the first thing that I did is I sewed 2 of those 4.5 by 12.5 strips on both sides of this one, of this side, okay? Both of them, both left and right. And on this side, you just want to put it on one, okay? So there's just one on here on this side, okay? So put that back. All right, then remember I said you wanted to sew 3 of the strips with 2 4.5 inch square, or 3 of the strips with with the 4 patches on either side, and 3 of the strips with 1 patch. The 2 patches on either side go on this side of your quilt, and the rest of them go on this side. I'm hoping you're seeing a trend here. So what I have done is I've added this first one to the top right. Now I will put this one down at the bottom, okay? And I will add this one to the bottom of the bottom square. On this side, I've already added one of the strips, okay? I will then do the same thing. I will add this one here and this one at the bottom down here, okay? It doesn't matter which way you do it, you just want to keep consistent, because once we get these blocks built, we will have 4 to, I will sew the top and the bottom together on this side, the top and the bottom together on this side, and then I will sew the 2 halves together. Okay, so that's it, guys. This is it. Now, I wanted to mention if we were to keep going, if we had 3 of these going down, I would just then add a 2 to the top of this one, and if I had another block at the bottom, I would add this one to the top. Just the tops, as long as it goes. Just the tops, as long as it goes. And that way it has some consistency, and you could actually do this as you were making your block if you knew where they were going. Let me tell you guys, if you can put this on your table to figure out which block goes where, to be sure you're good, then you'll know which either you do the onesies or the twosies. So, but it's important that you add these 2 sides first, so that when you add your 4 patches on there, that they will in fact be big enough, okay? Because you'll need those 2 extra sides. But that's it really, guys. So I'm going to get all of my strips added, and then I'm going to put it together like a 4 patch. And I'll see you in just a second. Okay, now she is finished. Isn't she cute? Super love this project. Wasn't too hard. Went together pretty fast. Just have to pay a little attention. I want to talk about pressing, because I didn't do that when I talked about putting this together. When I added just the strip by itself, okay? When I added just the strip on the left and the right of this side, and just on the right for these ones, I pressed them going towards the strip, okay? When I added the 4 patches to the strip, I pressed them also going towards the strip. So that way, whenever they went and I added them on, these seams nested very nicely. It made it nice to do. When I added on this side, remember we had the strip with 2 4 patches? When I added it to the block, I pressed this side going towards the strip. So I added this one to this block, I pressed it going towards the strip. Down here, I pressed it going towards the strip. It's unfortunate, but when I added the singles to it, and I added this one that just had 1 strip with 1 4 patch, when I added it to the block, I pressed towards the block. This one, I pressed towards the block, and this one, I pressed towards the block. That way, when I went to sew these things together, they nested, okay? And on the top, I pressed going towards the strip. When I added the 2 blocks together, this one I pressed towards the block, so that this would nest very nicely together, okay? When I went to add the whole kit and caboodle as a 4 patch, okay? So that's why just like when you're doing that 4 patch right here, we press going towards the dark, So you're gonna make sure you press them in opposite directions, so that your seams will all nest and your points are on point, right? Makes it nice, makes it easy. And I will tell you, I pinned like nuts, because 12.5-inch blocks are long in themselves. Add another 8 inches, 12 and 8, 20, that's 20, right? Ish. when, you know, if you have two of them going, I mean, that's a big block. And when you're adding them together, they're really long. So I only wanted one really, really long, went all the way across, but the others I just pinned, you know, did 2 blocks at a time. So that's it, guys. That is St. Patty's wall hanging. Yay! The Clover. I love the Clover. I hope you like this too. Don't forget to look at that supply sheet so you didn't have to memorize any of the necessary items. And of course, I gave you for the top, you know, one of each of these blocks so you could know how to lay them out. Because remember, we laid out these 2.5 inch squares just slightly different because they're mirror image of each other. So that's all it is, guys. I again will be on Facebook today live at 3 p.m. Hope to see you there. It's our live Q&A, live quilting and answers. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. But I will see you there, I hope. If not, next week is another project. Small, well, it's a smaller-ish one. It's not a mug rug. It's bigger than that, right? It's like this size. So hope to see you there. I think it's a little bit bigger. We'll see. We will see you next week with that. Another fun project for you. See you out at 3, or I'll see you next week. But until next time, may you all continue to be inspired, productive, ever so joyful. Never stop believing and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. I love y'all. Thank you for stopping by. I'll see you soon.